Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us. My name is Tiffany Henry, and I'm the director of the Small Business Center, and we are excited to be able to bring to you a series of training for value added, and we are doing this in partnership with the small business centers in the western part of the state, so Haywood, Southwestern, and Tri-County Community Colleges, along with the Empowering Mountain Food Systems program, and you're going to hear more from Laura about that program towards the end of this program. And Smithson Mills is going to be your primary speaker today, and he comes to us from Blue Ridge Food Ventures. And if you are somewhat local, you're going to be very familiar with that one. And we are really excited that he is here and willing to share and impart all of his useful knowledge to us. So it's a real treat to have Smithson. He has a passion for rural North Carolina and value added. So we're really excited. So Smithson, I'm going to just go ahead and turn this over to you and let you get started.
Hey, Tiffany, thank you. Thanks, everybody. Appreciate your attending this morning. This is the second in our series of weekly presentations about value-added food. And today we're going to focus in on basics of what you need to know to get started in your new food business. Before we start, Tiffany, can you tell us how many people are on the line right now?
Sure. So we're going to go through, I know that we wanted to do a little bit of introductions with regards to, I don't want you to go into much detail. Really all I need to know, because we need to keep this as brief as possible. I want you to tell me where you are located and what your value added product is. And so I'm going to go through my sort of list here, and I'll allow you to talk. So if you will talk when I come to you. So I'm going to go ahead, and so this is, I think, Jeff, we have you. There you go.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Jeff Harrell from Fresh Epicurean Farms. We do herb oils and purees.
And located where?
In Gloucester, North Carolina.
Okay. Yeah, you were with us last week. Awesome. Okay, thank you.
Right. You're welcome.
All right. Angel, tell us where you're located and what your product is or will be.
Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes.
Okay. I'm in Baltimore, and I'm actually trying to start a homemade pet food business.
Oh, okay. All right. Now, Catherine.
Hey, good morning. My name is Catherine Topol. I'm west of Asheville. My husband and I raise a heritage pig. It's a lard breed, and so our value-added product will be sausages and lard at this time. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Katrinka. All right, Katrinka, if you can hear me, you just tell us where you're located and what you are considering producing or are. We can hear you, Katrinka. Can you hear us? Pinky. Okay, so we can hear you, and we want you to tell us where you're located and if you have a value-added product that you are looking at producing or currently producing. All right, so we're having some issues with Tinky's microphone. You can always also type in the chat as well. Danny, you're next. Tell us. All right, Danny, I'm not able to unmute you. So if you can just type in the chat where you're located and the product that you are trying to produce, that would help us. And Matisha, same thing. If you have an older version of Zoom, it won't let me unmute you and allow you to talk. So
Tiffany, what if we just ask people to please enter into the chat what
yeah, I
they're
think we're
making
going to have
and where they're
to.
from, and then we can visit that back after we get a little bit deeper into this.
Yeah, let's do that.
Okay. All right. Well, then I'm going to go ahead and proceed. And basically what I want to do is give y'all some information that I believe is helpful for anybody who is starting a new food business, and also some considerations. We don't have answers for everything, but things that you need to think about in order to be ready to enter the marketplace. I'm going to go through a quick checklist that I think is probably the most important thing that I would recommend anybody who comes in our door and says they want to start a food business. First is, I recommend a statement of goals. What do you want to do with your business? If you don't know where you're going, you're probably going to wind up somewhere else. So a statement of goals of what you want to do with your business is pretty important. Second is a plan for getting to your goals, basically a business plan to execute where you want to be. If you want to have $1 million in sales by 2023 of your product, then you need to have a plan on getting there. And obviously, a product to make and sell. It's not uncommon for people to come to me and say, I want to get into the food business, but I don't know what to make. Can you tell me what sells, please? That is not really my recommended way of going about your business. You've got to know what you want to make and what you want to sell. Also, you need to have a registered business with a name and address. You can do a DBA, you can do an S Corp, you can do a small business LLC. There's a lot of different various opportunities for legal incorporation, and different ones are appropriate for different people. You're going to need a brand name. A lot of people say, well, you know, I'm Joe and I make hot sauce and my brand is Joe's Hot Sauce. That's perfectly fine. But think in terms of where your brand is going to be seen, not necessarily this year, but next year, the year after that, and the year after that. What do you want people, if your aspiration is to sell in the entire East Coast, do you want a brand name that says Waynesville's Finest? Maybe not. If you want to sell in Haywood County, you might want to go for Waynesville's Finest. But think in terms of where you want to be with that brand in the future before you decide on what you're going to run with. The next thing people really need is working capital. With almost no exception, you are going to have to spend money before you're going to make money. And most people don't have a lot of working capital going into this line of work, but they need a certain amount. They need to know how much is enough. Typically, I tell people, if you're going to start a small-scale food business with direct retail sales and working out of Blue Ridge Food Ventures, I would recommend that you have between $5,000 and $10,000 in working capital as you get started, with a plan to turn yourself into a positive cash flow situation before that working capital is exhausted. Product liability insurance. In order to sell into just about any marketplace, you're going to need a certain amount of product liability insurance. Different insurers have different opportunities for purchasing. The type of product you're making will also determine the amount that you're paying for your liability insurance. But generally speaking, retailers would like to see that you have $2 million of coverage with $1 million per event. That sounds like a whole lot, but it's pretty standard these days if you want to sell through someone like Ingles. The cost of that for naturally occurring high acid products such as jams and jellies can be as low as $400 a year. and it can go up from there depending upon what you're making. But I would recommend that you purchase liability insurance before you start selling into the marketplace, because it's the type of thing that nobody really wants insurance until they absolutely have to have it. And when you need it, you really need it. Continuing our checklist, a label design. I think last week I told people, if you're going to spend money on marketing, you need to spend money on your label design so that it is in compliance with the regulatory requirements of labels, but also that it's attractive and it brings customers towards your product. A good label is probably, I can't think of money better spent than having a great label design. A complete list of ingredients and recipes. You'd be surprised how many people come to me and tell me they've got the world's best X, call it, let's say, chow chow, world's best chow chow. And I say, what's in there? And they say, oh, I can't tell you that. Well, you have got to tell the consumer what's in the product that you're selling. There are ways to sort of circumvent the details of what's in there, so you can keep proprietary certain amounts of spices that you're putting in or whatnot. But generally, you have to list your ingredients on the label with the largest amount first, working down from there. That's a pretty standard law. A complete list of packaging materials and inputs. When you start looking at making a product, think in terms of how much are you going to be spending on your bottles, your caps, your tamper bands. How many people have thought about tamper bands? You know, when about 25 or 30 years ago, there were cases of people tampering with, I believe it was Tylenol caps, bottles, putting poisons in there, and that created a revolution in food packaging. So basically all foods have to have tamper ban resistant type packaging. Knowledge of your regulatory requirements. If you were making a dairy product versus a meat product versus a naturally occurring acidified product versus something where you're adding acidification, all of those fall under different regulatory needs. And so you need to know where you fall in the regulatory environment and how you are going to be in compliance. And the way you do that is to meet or communicate with the relevant regulatory authorities. For most of you, your regulatory authority is going to be the Food and Drug Administration or the entity in your state that is authorized to enforce Food and Drug Administration rules. If you are handling meat products, you're going to fall under the U.S. Department of Agriculture's Food Safety Inspection Service. If you're producing a cheese product, you're going to fall under the USDA's dairy inspection rules. Same goes for eggs. You're going to fall under an egg inspection rule. So you need to meet with your relevant regulatory authorities. I would recommend coming to meet with Blue Ridge Food Venture staff or your small business center staff that can sort of direct you towards the regulatory authority that you're most going to be working with. And then you need to have a way to make or obtain your product in a manner that meets that regulatory compliance. When I say make or obtain, some people make product themselves. Probably most people who are small and starting out make product themselves, but other people will pay somebody else to make their product for them so that they can sell. That is typically called co-packing. So you may find that it's cheaper or less of a hassle for you to pay somebody else to make your product for you. The downside to that is that you have to have a certain minimum order before anybody's going to be interested in making your product for you. You're going to need a place to safely store your inventory. Your storage areas are also subject to regulatory inspection. So you certainly want to have a safe place for both inputs and final finished product. And that typically is not your home kitchen or your home basement. And you're going to need finally a way to transport your product from storage to your customers in a safe manner. If you have a refrigerated product, you're going to need refrigerated transportation. That could be as basic as some giant seafood igloo type, what do you call them, coolers that people use dry ice or ice to take to the tailgate market. It might also involve a refrigerated box truck. Some people move up to that. It all depends on what your product is. I'm going to talk about developing. Tiffany, do we have any questions that have popped up? I don't see a discussion side or anything. I'm just seeing my full screen.
No, we do not.
Okay. I want to talk about developing your business plan. If you don't have a business plan, you need one. And a lot of people will say they have their business plan in their head, and that's all well and good, but I highly recommend having a written business plan. It's really important to write a plan because you need to show not only yourself that you know what you're doing, but you're going to need to show other people you know what you're doing. That is going to describe your planned or current business activity in as much detail as possible. Enunciation of your goals and aspirations for your business also are included in your business plan. It realistically identifies your key strengths and opportunities. What are you providing that somebody else isn't? It also IDs your main weakness and threats. You might sort of understand that you do not have economy of scale that your competitors have, or you may have less working capital than your competitors have. Knowing where your weaknesses and threats are help you address those before they have a negative impact on your overall business. 7 main parts of a business plan. If you go online and Google up main parts of a business plan, you will probably find many different web pages that talk about the 3 main parts of a business plan, the 5 main parts of a business plan, the 7 main parts, 9 main parts. I settled on 7 because I feel like this adequately addresses what I would look for if I were a bank lender or somebody that was looking at investing in a business. I would want to see these. First is an executive summary, which is truly the summary of everything else that's in there. A description of your company. Again, when you're writing this, think in terms of you're taking this written report to somebody who can give you the working capital that you need to succeed. It's not necessarily just for you, but it also lays things out. You might think you have it all clear in your head, but writing this stuff out can be very useful, and you can go back and revisit that a year, 2 years, or 3 years later and make sure that you're on track. Describes the products and services. A market analysis. How big is the market for your product? And what is the strategy and implementation for getting into that marketplace? What is your organization and management team? That organization and management team may not necessarily be your own employees. They may be people that you're contracting with or working in a collaborative manner, might be your own family members who are helping you. But you want to identify the roles they play and why they're important to your organization. And then a financial plan and long-term projections of cash flow. Cash flow is probably the most important thing everybody's worrying about when they first start out. Market analysis is another section that you want to look at. I do a lot of market research for people over the years. I've researched shiitake mushrooms in the Charlotte grocery store market. I've researched market analysis for exports of products to the Far East. Lots of different ways, and it can be very helpful to identify where you're going to be selling. You also want to know who are your competitors, where do they sell, and how are you going to compete? Are you going to go head to head with them and try to take them off a shelf and replace them, or are you going to try to sell into marketing streams that they may not even be aware of? We have several successful clients at Blue Ridge Food Ventures who have decided not to so much go head to head with their competitors, but to find retailers who are not currently carrying anything like that and getting in there. One of our most successful clients established a very robust distribution network with independently owned pharmacies and has been very successful in that. What's the realistic demand for your products? You know, if you could say, you know, if 1/10 of 1% of all Americans buy my stuff and you're making $3 off of each thing that you sell, you're going to become very rich very quickly. But that's probably not a realistic demand for your product because you're not selling to all of America, or you're selling to a specific geographical region, and you want to hit a certain percentage of the people in that geographic region. Very few people are going to know exactly how many people are going to buy their product, but you can get an idea of the demographic profile of your typical consumer. Where will those consumers buy your product? Are they going to buy it at the tailgate market? Are they going to buy it at the grocery store? Are they going to buy it at the bodega down the street? Are they going to buy it from independent pharmacies? You know, those things. This is important information for you to know. And where are you going to be a year from now, 3 years, and 5 years? Knowing, again, having a plan, aspirations, and a plan to get there is half the battle. Any questions?
Nope.
Cool. All right, I'm going to pivot over to cost of goods sold. Cost of goods sold is really, really important. And this is essentially the cost of everything that you put into a product before you take it to market. A lot of people don't realize all the things that go into the cost of goods sold until they actually start their businesses, because some things are not as obvious as others. Some of those costs of goods, well, again, why do we want to know our cost of goods sold? It is the most important part of your financial planning. If you're spending more money making your product than you are in selling it, you're losing money every time you sell 1 unit of your product. You don't want to be in that situation. It also identifies costs of producing, handling, and selling your products. All of those are important. Transportation is something that a lot of people overlook. Also, the cost of paying somebody to sell your product at a retail point of sale. Maybe you are the person at that retail point of sale and you're not giving yourself any compensation. That's probably not a good idea. You want to factor in the cost of your time as the overall cost of goods sold. When you really dial this in well, you can know exactly what, or a very, very close estimate, accurate estimate of per unit costs. It's not uncommon for one of my clients to come in and say, I know that this year it's costing me $1.34 to make each jar of X. And if you raise my prices by this much, then it's going to cost me $1.45. And that takes away from your profit margin. So once you know your per unit costs, you can know what your profit margins are on your sale, but you can also see areas where you're spending maybe more money than you want to spend. And you can focus on getting some of those cost of goods sold prices down to lower your per unit costs and make you more profitable and more competitive. You also want to accurately estimate aggregate costs over a period of time. If you're expecting to be making 10,000 units of hot sauce over the next 12 months, it would be very beneficial for you to know how much you're going to have to spend on bottles, labels, caps, raw materials, tamper bans, transportation costs, storage costs, retail costs. All of those are going to help you know how much working capital you need. Boom. Essential parts of a COG: ingredients, packaging, infrastructure, utilities. Don't overlook the cost of gas and electricity to run your business. Transportation, vans, trucks, trucking services. If you're paying UPS to haul your stuff, that's part of your cost of goods sold. Labor and associated costs. The associated costs can include workers' compensation and what I call FICA. That's Social Security and other federal costs that the employer has to incur when they have employees. Another thing that you need to factor in is insurance costs. You've got to have that liability insurance in order to get into marketplaces. You've got to have insurance for your facilities and your autos that are involved in there. And these are things that add up over time. There might not be like one particular expense that's tremendous, but when you start looking at them all, I know at Blue Ridge Food Ventures, our total insurance bill is around $12,000 a year. That's a big expense. Other expenses are professional services, accountants, legal support, and other design services for your labels, for example. That would be a professional service. Point of sale costs, miscellaneous overhead, and marketing. fall into the other. So once you know your cost of goods sold, then you can pivot towards how you're going to do your pricing. Pricing is not going to be uniform when you're selling a product. You're going to be selling hopefully through multiple channels. I would not recommend that you have only one way to sell your product. You want to have a lot of different ways to sell your product. And each of those is going to have a different price point based upon the circumstances of that channel. One of our most successful food entrepreneurs around the Asheville market has said to me, if my product isn't the most expensive in its category, I don't want to be there. I find that to be rather interesting and informative because this individual, I know him and he's been very successful with his products over the years. And he avoids getting into a situation where he is being price competitive with competitors who may have larger economies of scale and be able to produce things at a lower cost of goods sold than he can. So he goes for the highest end of the spectrum for a premium product that is unique and cannot be found elsewhere. The alternative point of view is if you sell to the masses, you will live with the classes. And if you sell to the classes, you will live with the masses. This is the Sam Walton viewpoint on how to make a lot of money in the food business. Large amounts to large amounts of people at very low cost and low profit margins. Almost none of us are in a position to operate like that. So I tell most of our clients who come in the door, try to be more like this guy than this guy. Your price point is based on a lot of varying factors. The very simplest is to figure out your cost of goods sold and the minimum profit that you're satisfied with, and that comes to your base price. This is not typically the best way to go about it, but if you can't get over that base price, then you've got a problem. Pricing for different sales channels, you're going to have one price for direct retail. Obviously, direct retail typically gives you the highest profit margin on a per unit basis. But at the same time, you are selling probably less product than you would if you were selling through other channels. You're selling one unit at a time, direct retail. I know a guy who goes down to Wall Street in Nashville every Saturday morning. He sells jams and jellies in front of Early Girl Cafe. And he and his wife have been doing that for coming up on 20 years now, and they've done quite well. But they also have branched out into wholesale. So while the retail is a good moneymaker for them, they also know that they can't rely on that exclusively for their business. The next level up after direct retail is case sales to a smaller retailer. If you've got a local mom and pop food store that likes to feature locally made products, marketing perhaps to the tourist trade, that's not uncommon next step for people who have gone from retail to the next step up. And so you're selling by the case, which is usually 12 units in a case. Your price to that small retailer is going to be substantially less than the price you're going to charge to a consumer coming to the tailgate market. You might have a 40% discount or more for that. The next step up is large case orders to larger retailers. This would be somebody might say, we need 10 cases delivered to our specialty grocery store every week. Again, your price is going to be less for this than for this, and substantially less than for this. So you're making it up on volume. And finally, you get to sales through professional distributors. That's going to be probably your lowest per unit profit margin. But again, you can sell tens of thousands of products of units through someone like that, all at one fell swoop. And then finally, online sales. And online 3 months ago, online sales were one of many different channels. Because of COVID, online sales have jumped for a lot of different companies quite a bit. And we could teach an entire seminar on online sales. And I don't think you would be bored. So do as much as you can to educate yourself about online sales. Typically, people will sell more successfully through existing portals such as Amazon or others that are Etsy. Those types of venues can help you with sales. You're also going to want to have your own standalone website that can drive sales to those portals. But typically you're going to sell more through an existing global portal than through creating your own website. Any questions? Nope. Going to go to sourcing. Can y'all hear me?
Yeah, you're doing good.
Okay, good. Sourcing, it's kind of strange. It's like throwing everything into a void, not knowing where it's going. Sourcing ingredients and inputs are a big part of someone's business. It's crucial for growing your business. It's a major determinant on your wholesale price points. Aggressive sourcing keeps your costs of goods down. The more successful companies that I've worked with always look for better deals on ingredients coming in. Bottles, labels, caps, all of those things are subject to change based upon price. I would caution you to not sacrifice quality for price too much. We've had some clients that have made big mistakes, high dollar mistakes, doing things like trying to source bottles from China or ingredients from Indonesia. These are things that, you know, just temper yourself a little bit. Make sure that wherever you're getting your product, it's coming from reputable sources and that you're getting good quality control. Scaling up your production should result in lower costs of goods sold. I'll give you an example. If you're making jams and jellies, you're going to need sugar. If you're making only a few dozen jars of jams and jellies, you're probably going to buy your sugar by the bag at Ingles, and you're going to pay a lot more than if you were buying, say, 20, 50-pound bags of sugar on a pallet. If you can get to the point where you're producing tens of thousands of units in a given month, your costs of goods sold are going to go down quite a lot. That also goes for labels. I don't know if y'all have had a lot of experience with printers, but usually the first copy of whatever you're printing is the most expensive thing you're going to buy. The more units of printing that you purchase, the lower the per unit cost will go. It's good to have multiple sources. It keeps your current vendors honest. There are cases where you're buying something that is so unique and so special for your business that you've only got one supplier. That may be necessary for you, but recognize that you're putting yourself at a strategic threat when you are dependent upon one source for your product. Other key questions. How much do I need to produce and sell to make a profit? That's a pretty simple question. The answer can be a little bit more complicated. A lot of it depends on where you want to be and how much profit you want to make. But generally speaking, people who are starting new food businesses are not going to be making money. They're not going to be profitable for a few months at least while they're ramping up. How much should my labor costs be as a percentage of revenues? In the production environment that we have here at Blue Ridge Food Ventures, most of our clients are trying to keep their labor costs at well under 50% of their sales costs of their product, or their sales price of the product. So if your labor costs are more than 50% of what you're charging for your product, then you probably have a problem. So try to make sure that you can get that down. And then other metrics of business performance can be, you know, what is my electricity bill, or what is my utility bill per every 1,000 units I'm selling? How much am I spending on marketing versus my gross revenues? There's 1,000 different metrics that you can play with, and if you know how to use Excel, you can start to create spreadsheets where if there's a change in your business activity and you can quantify that in a cost of goods sold sort of manner, you can change that, and then your per unit costs and metrics can change. So if you're into math, then you're going to really have a good time playing around with different factors of whether or not you're succeeding in your business. I think I've talked briefly about co-packing versus do-it-yourself manufacturing. Most people who are starting their business are forced to do-it-yourself manufacturing. They need to have an inspected or a facility that can be inspected and pass regulatory requirements. Typically, that means you can't do it in your home kitchen. Depending on what you're doing, you're going to have to be under an environment that would pass FDA inspection or USDA inspection. If you're doing catering, you're going to be under the county health department, and they're somewhat more lenient than FDA, but they're still not going to allow for home kitchen preparing catering meals unless you have things like a pet-free environment and other types of sanitary checkoffs that make them comfortable. Business management tools, I would recommend for anybody who's starting a business. QuickBooks is a great financial management tool. You may just want to be using Excel when you're starting out, but if you're going to grow, you're going to need QuickBooks at some point. I'm sure you can take QuickBooks classes through your community college. Small Business Center can direct you to where you can get that sort of training. You're going to need a cell phone, which you probably already have. You're going to want to have Square. Square has revolutionized direct retail sales for small food businesses at places like tailgate markets. It wasn't that long ago, if you didn't have cash, you couldn't buy a product. Now with Square, even any business can take a credit card or a debit card. You're typically going to be paying around 3.5% for the use of the Square, but it's worth it. And finally, you're going to need a functioning laptop. I would recommend spending more money on a good laptop than less money on a crappy laptop. I'm a Mac fan. Wasn't always that way, but I'm looking at a computer right now that is about 7 years old, and it works better than anybody's Word type, laptop computer around here. So everybody's jealous of my computer. Staffing, contract versus employee labor. And back in the old days, you basically hired people to make your stuff, or you hired people to carry your stuff. These days, we're sort of in the gig economy. One of our most successful companies here has exactly one full-time employee, and that is the owner. She's probably doing a little bit over $500,000 in sales, but she is contracted with people to do her online marketing and sales, distribution, communications. So, while she is not creating jobs in her office, she is in fact creating 5 or 6 jobs around her. It's very difficult for me to talk to economic developers and have them understand the economic impact, because everybody's in this 20th century mindset of employment being that I give you a check every week. But we are moving more and more to contract labor, and I would encourage you to contract as much as you can because it's a lot simpler and it will cost less. Production labor, that's a big sticky wicket. Most people are not producing enough product to justify full-time employment. So you might have to hire people on a part-time basis to come in and help you. At a place like Blue Ridge Food Ventures, we have floaters who work for multiple food businesses here and can come in if you need somebody for Tuesday afternoon from 2 until 5. There might be somebody who has that slot available and they're looking forward to working with somebody. Then sales and marketing labor is another thing you have to factor in. And you have to know when to make a hire. Typically, you make a hire when you can't see any other way. It should be the last option, really, because once you hire somebody, you're committing yourself to their well-being And it is no fun to have to fire somebody because your sales have gone down. And you've also got to look at workers' compensation and unemployment insurance. All of those things can make hiring an individual a lot more expensive than you initially think it's going to be. Other considerations for your new business. You're going to have to pay sales tax for direct retail sales. If you're at a tailgate market doing retail sales and you're not paying sales tax because you think nobody's looking, you're wrong. There are people who are observing and paying attention to whether or not sales tax is being paid. And it's probably a whole lot easier to just pay your sales tax now than to have somebody knock on your door 2 years from now and ask if you've got proof of the sales tax that you paid. You're going to need to have an EIN and a legal status established. Again, you may want to be a DBA using your Social Security, but you may want to establish yourself as a separate legal entity and get your own employment identification number. Workers' comp is another thing I've just mentioned that you're going to have to look at. State unemployment insurance is something. And privilege licenses. Used to be a time when you had to pay $15 a year to the city of Asheville to operate here. I think the General Assembly has eliminated the cost of privilege licenses. It doesn't mean you don't have to necessarily get one, but you can't, the municipalities can't charge money for it. And final thoughts on business development before I turn things over to Laura. Successful companies are always evolving and responding to the current conditions. If you have stasis, that equals death. A business is either going to grow or to fold. You can try to keep it just status quo and say, I want to do exactly what I did last year, this year. That's probably not going to happen. You're either going to get a little bit bigger or a little bit smaller. The business plan is a living document. It's always to be updated to reflect new developments. You don't write that business plan, set it on a shelf, and walk away from it. Successful businesses also become very good at anticipating results 6 months to a year out. That was a lot more true 3 months ago than now, because we're in this really weird time and we don't know what's going to happen in 6 months. So the business community, the one thing I think the business community hates more than anything else is uncertainty. If you know it's going to suck and you can plan accordingly, fine. But if you don't know whether it's going to be bad or good or in between, it creates a lot of stress for businesses. So we are living in that environment now, and hopefully we won't be there in 6 months to a year, but there's no guarantees right now. Finally, it's never too early to, sorry for the spelling, too early to envision an exit plan. An exit plan meaning to leave your business. We all leave where we are at some point, whether we want to or not. It's not a bad idea to think about whether you'd like to sell your business at the end, or pass it on to somebody in your family, or just fold it up at some point and go on and go fishing. Sometimes people make more money on their exit than they do the whole time that they've got their business. That's called selling your business and moving on to something else. So that's all I have right now. I hope I've been able to spark some interest from you about what you need to do to plan and to succeed. And at this point, I'm going to turn things over to Laura. I'm going to turn off screen sharing.
Hey, Smithson, we do have a question for you.
Yeah.
So does Blue Ridge offer clients templates for financial spreadsheets, product costing, business planning, etc., that you can recommend?
Well, the small we are co-located with the Buncombe County Small Business Center, the AV Tech Small Business Center, and we let the small business centers take the lead on that type of business planning and the templates. But we can sit in on those meetings and provide information that's going to be very helpful. And I don't know what y'all do at the other small business centers, but I would imagine y'all have the same types of services.
Yes, we do.
Mm-hmm.
So I would say, just to follow up to Danny, would be to either you reach out to your local small business center, wherever that is. So for those of you that aren't familiar with the Small Business Center as a whole, let me just kind of give you a sort of a brief overview. So we're a state-funded resource supported by the community college system, and we work with people that are looking at starting a business or have a small business. And every community college across the state has a small business center. So whatever county you're located in, whatever community college that serves that county, there's a small business center there for you to reach out to. And so I would highly recommend that you start there. That would be a great first step. We have another question here. When looking at cost of goods sold for meat production and value added components, is it a best practice to look at the growth to processing side separately from the product to retail side, or combined?
That's a good question. When it gets into animal meat production, it can get very, very complicated very quickly. The trick with animal meat production is that you want to sell the entire animal. You know, we get lots of calls. When I worked for NC Department of Agriculture, we get lots of calls from meat processors saying that they had all of these hams they didn't know what to do with. They're selling everything but the ham. So in my experience with meat processing and production, is I put a cost of production of each step in the process. You know, what is the kill cost? What is the cut up cost? What is the retail packaging cost? So there's a lot of different ways of looking at that. But it is one of the more difficult of all of the food products that I've dealt with in determining cost of goods sold.
So I'm sharing screen now, so I can't see the chat box, but for these specific meat processing questions, NC Choices at the Center for Environmental Farming Systems, which is who I work for at NC State, has done a fantastic job of helping small scale producers address these questions. And so I can't paste their website in right now, but maybe Tiffany can. And but if you, it's very easy to find them, NC Choices, and they just have so many resources about these questions that about processing and small.
Is it ncchoices.com, or I'm sure it's not well, since it's NC State.
Yeah, they have their own separate. Yeah, but we'll paste it in there. And Empowering Mountain Food Systems is going to have a webinar with them very soon, just on how to use their website, because there's so much information there.
Awesome.
And this is a huge issue nationally, especially after COVID or during COVID, this meat processing issue. So, okay, good questions all. If the chat is clear, Tiffany, I'm going to go ahead and start, if that's okay.
Yeah, I'm just looking to make sure that we didn't miss anything. I think we are caught up on everything. So yeah, go ahead.
All right, folks. Well, we are working with both the small business centers in the region and Blue Ridge Food Ventures through CAFÉ, the Center for Ag and Food Entrepreneurship. And Empowering Mountain Food Systems is a 3-year project based in the 7 southwestern North Carolina counties of Clay, Macon, Swain, Graham, Jackson, Haywood, and Cherokee. And we're working in the Qualla boundary of the Eastern Band of Cherokee Indians as well. And so you'll see on this slide where we get our funding from. Appalachian Regional Commission is our main funder, and I work for North Carolina Cooperative Extension, and the Cherokee Preservation Foundation is supporting our local regional foods agent. And so we're a robust project, but we are only a 3-year project, and we're just about 1 year in. And part of our work is this value-added piece with Smithson's group, and the Small Business Center. So I just wanted to explain a little background. It's really windy where I'm at. I'm hoping this is coming through okay.
We can hear you and your wind chimes.
Okay, sorry. Okay, there we go. Here's my next slide. So the goal of our project is to improve the regional food system through education, entrepreneurship, and infrastructure. And you can see our little map here. Here is our regional focus. The Southwestern Commission, the Council of Government, is also a major partner. And our goal, what drives us every day, what we ask ourselves is, what are we doing to increase farm and food business income? And so for this audience, I wanted to just describe what we're doing with CAFÉ and Blue Ridge Food Ventures. So we're supplying up to $3,000 in support per business. Smithson's team member, Michael McDonald, is the entry point into Blue Ridge Food Ventures and how you can work with them. They can help on many different aspects of your journey in value added. So product development, recipe development, ingredient sourcing, regulatory requirements, marketing, and then the production piece at their facility in Inca area. Does anybody have any questions about that point right there? That's a big one. Okay.
I don't see anything yet.
All right. And so beyond our work with Blue Ridge Food Ventures, we are also working with food and farm businesses on finance and direct grants. We're hitting our stride, and with support from the small business centers, folks enter our application process, and we have bought all types of production equipment for people, everything from soda production to kettle corn to apple cider to chicken processing. The only caveat that we just to be clear that when we make payments, the payment does not go to you, the producer, the payment goes to the vendor. And so there's a process we go through with NC State to do that. And it's a little bit of paperwork, but it does work.
We have one question really quick.
Okay.
How do you apply for the 3,000 support again?
If you go to our website, Empowering Mountain Food Systems, on our homepage, there is a purple button on the right that says apply here. And Tiffany might be able to take a minute and post that link into the chat. You go through that portal, you answer a bunch of questions, and then you have an intake process. And for the month of June, I'm doing the intake, so I'm really looking forward to that. We do the intake process, and we determine, which way do we send you? Do we send you to Blue Ridge directly, or do we send you to the Small Business Center to do all that work that Smithson was talking about? Before we want you to buy a piece of equipment, we want you to sit down with the Small Business Center to determine, what is your business plan? What are your costs of production? What do you really need? So you go through that process. You go through that process as well to be eligible for this cost share. We are working with these funders that are listed here: Natural Capital Investment Fund, Mountain BizWorks, the Sequoia Fund, and your funder. We funded a chicken processor, small scale guy. He got a loan through Carolina Farm Credit, and we offered 30% of his loan to him, direct payment to Carolina Farm Credit to reduce his principal loan amount. So happy to talk to you all about that. We also have business support services. So advanced support for businesses that are beyond their basic business plan. You do your basic business plan. You might come to us and say, look, I've already got a business plan. I developed it a couple years ago. I took it to Tiffany. We've tuned it up. And I'm ready to go, and say they're interested in developing a label. Well, Blue Ridge Food Ventures could help you with that. And we can support that funding. But say you need legal assistance, you want to become an LLC, as one of the recommendations that Smithson had, or you need an accounting assistance, graphic design for your new label, web design, how to market your product. We supply all of those resources through our program. All right, and so one of the things that is not on here I wanted to mention is we also supply scholarships. If you have identified some training you need, Smithson does require for processing there. What is the training that y'all require Smithson to go through the what I've always called pickle school? Did we lose Smithson?
No, but he
Hello.
there, he had muted himself.
Yes, I'm sorry. Yeah, Laura. Okay, so acidified foods manufacturing is a better process control school is what.
Thank you.
The real name for pickling school. That's not required for all food products. That is required for acidified food manufacturing. And acidification is when you add something like vinegar or citric for the express purpose of lowering the pH to make it a shelf-stable product. And so that is one type of training. You may just need ServSafe. You may need there's several different certifications and trainings that people want to have, but it depends on what they're making.
Right. And so, you know, when you do your intake with Michael at Blue Ridge Food Ventures, if you're undertaking this process, he will let you know, okay, well, this is the training you need, and we will supply funding for you to do that. We request that our applicants pay a portion for scholarships. It's like 20% of that scholarship funding, but we also have that support as well. So it's a new program. It's a new program, but we will only be here through April 2022. So we really want y'all to take advantage of this while you can.
So I have two questions in the chat. Does NC Bio Network or Blue Ridge Food Ventures offer the knowledge-based assistance on recipe and production scaling to value-added meat producers, even though actual on-site production isn't allowed?
That's a hard question to answer because it depends on the individual product. But bottom line is we don't make meat products here,
right?
And our skill set is not for meat production. So probably no from us.
Okay, and this was for the. Oh, okay. Lost my chat.
So William asked, he's currently taking the acidified food course through NC State. Is it too late to apply for a scholarship? I can see if we can do, it's a paperwork issue. William, I can see if we can do a reimbursement to you. I think we can probably do a reimbursement to you. I'd encourage you, William, to go ahead and enter our portal and get into our system, and that's how you can get started.
So Smithson, I found what I was trying to find a second ago. My chat disappeared. That question was kind of in relationship to value-added, ready-to-cook lamb.
We don't have an experience or knowledge base to adequately address that.
Okay. Do you know if Bio Network, do they have any resources?
I have a feeling that NC Choices is still going to be your better selection there.
Okay.
I think in the past, NC Choices had worked with processors who had cooking operations or different types of value-added operations to provide outreach, but I'm not sure where they are right now.
Okay. All right. If you guys have any other questions, put them in the chat really quick before we wrap it up. But
and what's really important when Tiffany sends you the evaluation, we really want to know what else you want to know about this. We have 2 more sessions in this series that we encourage all y'all.
3 more. There's 3 more.
3. Pardon me. And you know, we're really eager to supply this, and one day we'll all be together again, and we can, you know, go and do a tour. A tour of Blue Ridge Food Ventures is definitely on our list of what we'll do when we can meet again.
Right. And next week, Michael McDonald will be leading our webinar to talk about food manufacturing, the nuts and bolts of the manufacturing side.
Yeah. And that's on the 16th. So really every Tuesday at the same time, you know, for the next 3 weeks, we'll have another sort of section. So next week's the food manufacturing for small scale businesses. All right. Well, I don't see any other questions. So, oh, hang on. I guess for next week, one of the questions, will that include sourcing ingredients next week?
I think if you ask Michael about that, he can help you. But I mean, since you're already in direct communication with him, if you have a specific sourcing need for ingredients, I'd just go straight to him and ask.
Okay. Perfect. All right. Well, if nobody has any other questions, we'll go ahead and end this webinar. And I would encourage you, if you have not registered for next week's webinar, that you make sure you do that for us. Okay. And look for an email. We'll send you an email with the evaluation, as Laura mentioned before. So thanks so much, guys. And I hope you have a great day.
Thank you, Tiffany.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Smithson.
Thank you.